Welcome to Pripyat, the ghost town frozen in time, where nature has reclaimed what was once a bustling Soviet city. Here, the eerily silent streets, abandoned buildings, and rusting amusement parks are stark reminders of the catastrophic event that turned this place into a desolate land. The Ferris wheel, a remnant of a Labor Day celebration that never happened, looms over the city, its silent spindles echoing the lost laughter of children. Wild animals roam freely through the crumbling infrastructure, a surreal testament to nature's resilience in the face of human tragedy. Pripyat was once a prosperous community, home to nearly 50,000 people, most of whom worked at the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Today, it's an exclusion zone, off-limits to most of the world, but strangely alive with a resurgence of wildlife. Trees grow through the floors of old classrooms, and vines climb the sides of apartment buildings, creating a post-apocalyptic landscape that is both beautiful and tragic. This paradoxical scenario serves as a poignant backdrop to the human stories of loss, bravery, and resilience that emerged from the disaster. As we walk these desolate streets, it's hard to imagine the life that once thrived here. The silence is deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of a bird. This silence is not just the absence of sound, but the echo of a monumental catastrophe that altered the course of history. To truly understand the magnitude of what happened here, we must go back to that fateful night in April 1986. I am Donato De Paula, narrator of Mysteries of the World, and here is our mini-documentary on the story of Chernobyl. If you like the video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the Misterios del Mundo channel, and turn on notifications. The year was 1986, and the Chernobyl nuclear power plant was a shining jewel in the crown of Soviet engineering. Situated on the banks of the Pripyat River, about 100 kilometers north of Kiev, it was a testament to the technological might and ambition of the Soviet Union. Pripyat, the city built to serve the plant, was a modern utopia with high-class apartments, schools, hospitals, and even an amusement park that would open on May 1st. The city thrived on the promise of a bright, nuclear-powered future. Chernobyl's 4 reactors, each capable of generating 1,000 megawatts of electrical energy, were among the most powerful in the world.
At the heart of this complex was Reactor 4 of the RBMK type, designed to produce both plutonium and electricity. The RBMK reactors were unique in their use of graphite moderators and water-based coolants, a combination that, while efficient, carried inherent risks. These reactors lacked the containment structures that were standard in Western designs, making them vulnerable to catastrophic failures if something went wrong. Despite these risks, the atmosphere at Chernobyl was one of confidence and routine. The plant had been operating without problems for years, and on April 25, 1986, it was a normal workday. The night shift had begun, and workers were preparing for a routine safety test at Reactor 4. This test was intended to simulate a power outage and ensure that the reactor's turbines could generate enough inertial energy to keep the water pumps running. Cooling running until the emergency generators came into operation. But this was no ordinary test. The operators on duty were not properly trained, and the procedures they were following had not been adequately reviewed. Additionally, safety-critical systems were being disabled one by one to prevent interference with the test. What should have been a simple procedure quickly turned into a recipe for disaster. As the clock struck 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986, the tranquility of the night was shattered by a deafening explosion. Reactor 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant had just suffered a catastrophic failure. The control room was thrown into chaos as alarms sounded and a blinding white and blue light shot through the reactor building. Panic set in as operators tried to comprehend the gravity of what had just happened. The first explosion was a steam blast, powerful enough to lift the reactor's 1,000-ton lid, destroying the concrete structure above it.
This was immediately followed by a second, even more devastating explosion, which opened the reactor core. A ferocious fire broke out, fueled by the reactor's graphite moderator, which burned intensely and released a lethal mixture of radioactive isotopes into the atmosphere. Inside the plant, the situation was desperate. The workers, many of whom were without protective equipment, were exposed to lethal doses of radiation. 2 plant workers died instantly in the explosion, while others rushed to contain the fire and stabilize the reactor, unaware of the invisible poison they were inhaling. The heroic efforts of these workers, many of whom would soon succumb to acute radiation syndrome, helped prevent the disaster from worsening further, but the damage was already done. The fire brigade arrived at the scene within minutes, led by Lieutenant Vladimir Pravik. They faced an unprecedented challenge, a nuclear fire that conventional methods could not extinguish. Firefighters bravely fought the flames, but without the proper equipment or knowledge of the intense levels of radiation, many received fatal doses. Lieutenant Pravik and his men were among the disaster's first victims, their sacrifice becoming a tragic symbol of Chernobyl's human cost. Meanwhile, the residents of Pripyat slept oblivious to the ongoing catastrophe. It was only several hours later that authorities began to understand the gravity of the situation. At 5 a.m., a citywide announcement instructed residents to stay indoors and close their windows, but it was too late. The radioactive crowd had already begun to spread, and the 49,000 inhabitants of Pripyat were exposed to harmful levels of radiation. The Soviet government, initially in denial, tried to downplay the disaster. It was only when radiation alarms were raised at a nuclear power plant in Sweden, more than 1,000 kilometers away, that the true scale of the accident became impossible to hide. On April 28th, the Soviet Union made a public announcement admitting that an accident had occurred at Chernobyl. At this point, the radioactive plume had already spread across Europe, carried by the winds, leaving a trail of contamination in its wake. Evacuations began on the afternoon of April 27th, more than 36 hours after the explosion. Buses filled the streets of Pripyat as residents were told they would be out of their homes for just a few days. Most left their belongings behind, hoping to return soon. Little did they know that they would never see their homes again. As the days passed, the Soviet government mobilized a massive cleanup operation. Soldiers, engineers, and scientists, later known as liquidators, faced an almost impossible task. The reactor's graphite fire, which burned at extreme temperatures, continued to expel radioactive material into the atmosphere.
Engineers and firefighters worked tirelessly to extinguish the flames, dumping thousands of tons of sand, boron, and lead into the reactor from helicopters hovering above. This risky operation, conducted without appropriate protective measures, exposed many of these workers to lethal doses of radiation. Construction of the sarcophagus, a massive concrete structure designed to encapsulate Reactor 4 and contain radiation, began almost immediately. This improvised containment, built under extreme conditions, was a temporary solution. Intended to limit the release of radioactive materials, it was not without flaws. The sarcophagus, constructed with much of the reactor debris still inside, remained a source of concern for decades. Meanwhile, the human cost of the disaster began to mount. Hospitals in Kyiv and other cities were overwhelmed with patients suffering from acute radiation syndrome. The 134 soldiers involved in the initial firefighting and containment efforts were the first to experience its brutal effects. Symptoms included severe burns, vomiting, and a drastic decrease in white blood cells, leading to fatal infections. Despite the best efforts of healthcare professionals, 28 of these people succumbed within weeks of the explosion. All fires were extinguished or contained within 6 hours, but few predicted that a second, more dangerous problem would soon emerge. The core of Reactor 4 was still melting fast. If it had melted completely, the consequences would have been catastrophic on an unprecedented scale. The molten core, fueled by the ongoing nuclear reaction, would have ruptured the containment structure, triggering a second, never-before-seen explosion.
This explosion would have devastated the entire Chernobyl power plant, destroying not only Unit 4, but also the other 3 reactors on site. The release of radioactive material into the atmosphere would have eclipsed even the initial explosion, spreading a lethal cloud of radiation and leaving Europe uninhabitable for around 500,000 years. A pool of water beneath the reactor threatened to trigger the second explosion, but draining that pool seemed like an impossible task. The flooded basement, submerged valves, and lethal radiation levels. However, faced with seemingly insurmountable odds, 3 men stepped forward to face the dark hallways and the invisible ghost of radiation trying to pierce every cell in their bodies. Their names may not be familiar, but their deeds echo forever in history. Alexei Ananenko, Valery Bespalov, and Boris Baranov, ordinary men placed in extraordinary circumstances, became the last line of defense against a nuclear apocalypse. The volunteers, known as the Chernobyl Suicide Squad, were dressed in wetsuits, armed only with determination and the beam of a flashlight that failed as the radiation increased. Yet they descended into the depths of hell. With the air thick with the stench of burning metal and the acrid smell of radiation, the men waded through waist-high pools of radioactive water. But they moved on. Then a ray of light pierced the darkness. With shaking hands, they closed the valves, isolating the pool of water and preventing a catastrophe of colossal proportions. Fortunately, the heroic group survived the feat because the water absorbed much more radiation than scientists imagined. For residents of Pripyat and the surrounding regions, life has changed irrevocably. The evacuation, initially described as temporary, became permanent. More than 350,000 people were eventually displaced, forced to leave behind more than their homes, but also their lives. The psychological impact of this sudden displacement was profound, contributing to a lasting sense of loss and trauma. Internationally, the Chernobyl disaster led to a re-evaluation of nuclear safety protocols. Stricter safety standards and emergency preparedness measures have been improved. The design flaws of the RBMK reactors, especially the lack of a containment structure, have been widely criticized. These reactors, still in operation at several locations, have undergone significant modifications to improve safety. The Chernobyl disaster left a profound mark on the health of those who lived in its shadow. In addition to the 28 deaths in the first few weeks, many more succumbed to radiation-induced illnesses in the following years. The best documented health effect has been the increase in cases of thyroid cancer, especially among children in Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. Radioactive iodine-131, released in large quantities during the explosion, contaminated the region's food and water supplies. Children, more susceptible to radiation, ingested this isotope mainly through the milk of cows that had grazed on contaminated grass. As a result, thousands of children developed thyroid cancer, a direct consequence of radiation exposure. Around 4,000 cases of thyroid cancer were attributed to the Chernobyl disaster, with some deaths occurring as late as 2004. Additionally, there have been increases in the incidence of leukemia, cataracts, cardiovascular disease, and other types of cancer among exposed populations. The psychological impact, often overshadowed by the physical health effects, was also significant. The trauma of the evacuation, fear of radiation, and the stigma associated with being from the Chernobyl region have led to widespread mental health problems, including anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder in thousands of people. One of the most alarming findings was the increase in birth defects and developmental anomalies among children born in the affected areas. These included congenital heart defects, neural tube defects, and other serious conditions such as microcephaly, hydrocephaly, and other serious birth defects among children born in Belarus and Ukraine. Ensuring the safety of the Chernobyl site has been an ongoing challenge since the immediate aftermath of the disaster. The sarcophagus, that concrete and steel structure built hastily to encapsulate Reactor 4, was built in just 206 days. It was an engineering feat, but it was never intended as a long-term solution. Cracks and leaks allowed radioactive dust to escape, posing ongoing risks to the environment and workers at the site. In the late 1990s, it became clear that a more permanent solution was needed to contain the remaining radioactive material and prevent the disaster from escalating to even greater proportions. Enter the New Safe Confinement, or NCS, was a monumental engineering project designed to encapsulate the deteriorating sarcophagus and provide a long-term solution. Construction of the NCS began in 2010. This massive structure, sometimes called an arch, was designed to last at least 100 years and withstand extreme weather conditions. The NCS is a marvel of modern engineering. At 109 meters high, 257 meters wide, and 162 meters long, it is the largest land-based mobile structure ever built. In November 2016, the NCS was successfully moved into place over the sarcophagus using a sophisticated hydraulic system. This process, which took 2 weeks, was a critical milestone in site security. NCS is more than just a physical barrier. It is equipped with advanced technology to monitor and manage conditions within the enclosure. This includes a network of sensors to detect radiation levels, robotic systems to handle radioactive materials, and automatic fire suppression systems. Within the NCS, efforts continue to decommission Reactor 4 and deal with the vast amounts of radioactive waste. This work is complex and dangerous, involving the removal of fuel and highly radioactive debris, as well as ongoing management of the site's internal environment. It is a task that will take decades to complete. Today, around 200 tons of radioactive material are still present inside the reactor, and the challenge of managing this waste will persist for generations. Today, more than 30 decades later, the Chernobyl exclusion zone, measuring some 2,600 square kilometers, remains a forbidding wasteland frozen in time.
As we venture into this mysterious realm, we are confronted with the ghostly remains of a once thriving community. Abandoned houses, schools, and factories are silent witnesses to the tragedy that unfolded here. Nature, reclaiming what once belonged to her, began to invade the decaying infrastructure, weaving a tapestry of desolation and beauty. Many species have returned to the area, some of which had not been seen for decades. But beneath the surface tranquility lies an invisible threat. Radiation levels in the exclusion zone remain dangerously high, posing a lethal threat to anyone who dares to stay for too long. Geiger counters click ominously as we navigate the irradiated landscape, a constant reminder of the invisible danger lurking in the shadows. As we delve deeper into the heart of the exclusion zone, we encounter the infamous Red Forest, a vast expanse of dead trees stained red by radioactive fallout. But perhaps the scariest sight of all is the abandoned city of Pripyat, which was once home to thousands of workers and their families. Pripyat is a ghostly monument to humanity's folly, with its ruined buildings and deserted streets serving as a reminder of the human cost of nuclear disaster. Even today, studies continue to examine the long-term genetic effects of radiation exposure on animals here. Higher mutation rates have been observed, and although wildlife appears to thrive, the full implications of their exposure to radiation remain a mystery. The Chernobyl disaster remains a haunting reminder of the catastrophic consequences that can arise from human error and negligence. The tragedy unleashed a relentless deluge of radioactive contamination, forever altering the landscape and the lives of countless people. As the dust settled and the smoke cleared, what remained was not just a failing reactor, now the most dangerous object in the world, but a scar etched into the fabric of history.
Yet amid the desolation, stories of courage and resilience emerged, of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges with unwavering determination. From the brave firefighters who fought the blaze to the group of volunteers who risked their lives to contain the second explosion, their sacrifices were not in vain. The lessons learned from Chernobyl must not be forgotten, lest we run the risk of repeating the tragic mistakes of the past.